Welcome to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs program featuring conversations about life in the central San Joaquin Valley. This program is brought to you in partnership between KFSR 90.7 FM and CMAC Fresno. I'm your host, Sevog Tatiosian. Today, we have Ray Arthur, the film commissioner, back in the studio to talk some more about his career. We were so fascinated the first time he was here that we invited him back. Mr. Arthur, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sevog. It's a great joy to be here.
Last time you were here, we talked about some pretty amazing stories that you had, and we didn't finish. We ran out of time, so you're back. I want to start by talking about the business aspect of movies. You know, I don't think that a lot of people understand that there is a lot of money to be made, not just on camera, but off camera.
More off camera. You always hear about the $200 million features, and the top 3 stars got 50 of that 200 million, and the director got his cut. And really the majority of the money that's, I don't want to say the majority, that may not be right, a great deal, a great percentage of the cost of making a feature film, a major feature film, goes to all those people that are that you see or you don't see because you walk out at the end of the movie. But the 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 minutes of the hundreds of people that are involved in a feature film. And all of those are middle-class workers, middle-class, you know, and some blue-collar workers. I mean, you have Teamsters and truck drivers and electricians, and it goes from the lowly production assistants who are kind of the gophers that are learning the business, all the way up to the directors of photography and the assistant directors, and all in between there. That's what makes, to a great extent, a $200 million movie cost $200 million. And when that movie shoots on location, all of those people get paid while they're on location, and they spend a percentage of that income while they're on location. And sometimes it's strange. We had I can't remember which feature film it was. If I remember correctly, it was Hidalgo, where I used to be employed as a film commissioner. And the accountant, the on-site accountant, had a wrap-up meeting with myself and the BLM representative, because it was BLM land. And he was talking about how the different funds were spent. And he said, yeah, we had we had a gaffer who spent nearly $1,000. Let me go back. It was for Planet of the Apes, because they were there for 6 months. Wow. He said we had a gaffer that spent almost nearly $1,000 with a local dentist. He got a new set of teeth.
That's incredible.
While he was on location for Planet of the Apes. So these are the things you don't think about as far as, you know, income, outflow, money spent, revenue.
But the headlines always say, actress A, 50 million, actor B, 100 million. But behind the scenes, you have all these people. Speaking of behind the scenes, you know, we have a volunteer crew that does San Joaquin Spotlight. And if ladies and gentlemen in the audience look at the credits, their names are on there. So in your opinion in this industry, is this a good start for some of our volunteer crew members?
This is an excellent start. We touched on that briefly the last time I was here. The combination of the training that CMAC provides, both through its classes and its hands-on training, and the interaction of the members of the Fresno Filmmakers Alliance and many, many dozens of local productions that are going on a month-to-month basis. Some paid for their crew, some unpaid for their crew, just to get the experience. This all gets, the phrase is, put on your reel. You know, you did this show, you can put it on your reel, and when you apply for the next job, you can say, you know, I did this as a volunteer with CMAC and show them your camera work or your sound work on San Joaquin Spotlight. And then after that, I was the sound technician for a commercial for Fresno State University's recruitment process that was commercially done by a local ad agency, and I was one of 3 sound technicians. These are credits on your resume and product on your reel that step by step get you to that next position.
Other work that's behind the scenes are the people who actually make the props. And the reason I bring this up is I had a cousin who lived in Tujunga, and next door, a couple of houses down, there was this house that had a bunch of movie props on it. What this gentleman was doing was making the props at his house. And there's obviously a living for that, would you say?
Yeah, carpenters, painters, I mean, all of the trades that are used throughout the United States are used in the film industry. And when they're on location, they hire local people to do that to a great extent. Now, depending on the size of the production and whether it's a SAG, a Screen Actors Guild production, and whether they have to hire union employees, but for the most part, they will hire some local people. We've had commercial productions come up here, and our pitch to them is, how big is your production? Oh, we have 80 people. Terrific. Bring your top 50 up and hire your 35, because if you hire your 35, you save that money in lodging. You don't have to put those people up in a hotel, so that's a savings to you. It puts local people here to work and gives them experience.
You know, this is good that we're having this conversation because it leads to the next topic I'm going to talk about. In California, last time you were on, we didn't know about this, but now in California, there's legislation making its way through the ranks. What would that legislation do?
Well, if you'll give me a minute, let me give you a little bit of background. I started as a film commissioner in 1992, and I was in a small city, but we also promoted and facilitated parts of 4 counties. So our total area was 10,000 square miles, and it was in the desert. So we had dry lake beds, and we had tufa towers, and we had ghost towns, and we had things that you couldn't find in other places. Very unique area. So as we started to market ourselves, we became more and more successful. We continued to be successful until about 2003. Every year except 2, between 1992 and 2003, our revenue for production grew, our local disposable income back into the city. But by 1999, in the state of California overall, they were starting to lose production, primarily to Toronto and Vancouver.
To Canada.
To Canada. Canada saw that they had the ability to provide the locations that California, Southern California, Hollywood needed, and they could do it more cost effectively in 3 ways. One was the exchange rate. When you exchange US dollars to Canadian dollars throughout the 90s and the early 2000s, actually even to 2010 or 11, it was a huge savings. So you could save money that way. Secondly, they gave a countrywide incentive. I think it was something like 7 or 8%.
7 or 8%?
Tax incentive.
Okay.
And then each of the provinces, think of provinces as states, each of the provinces in Canada also gave a 7 or 8% tax incentive, either a tax break or sometimes a simple cash back. For every dollar you spend in our province, we'll give you 8 cents back, 10 cents back, that type of thing. The third was you have to hire 75% of your crew in order to get all of these advantages
From-
has to be from Canada.
That's incredible.
They could bring Canadian crews in other areas in if they needed them, but 75% of your crew, not your cast. If you want to bring all the actors up, that's fine. So they would bring up directors, producers, directors of photography, their top sound guy, their top light guy, that type of thing. And then all the vendors, caterers, those types of things, they were all Canadian. But to bring this all down into a very easy understanding, and I've totally forgotten this gentleman's name, but I met him in the early 2000s. He was speaking at a California Film Commission symposium, and he and I talked afterwards, and I said, so I get the savings bit by bit, and it all adds up. Can you give me an example? And he said, Ray, the easiest thing I can say is for every 3 movies of the week that I produce in Canada, I get the 4th one free. So it was a total 25% savings. So if he's doing a $10 million movie of the week, he does 4 of them for $30 million in Canada instead of $40 million. Now, the downside of that, those of us who remember watching the very early episodes of The X-Files, I was a huge X-File guy. But do you remember how it was always kind of darkish and sometimes at night it was bluish? That wasn't because it was aliens. That was because they didn't have the quality cameramen and lighting people that we did here. But what happened was, with the amount of revenue that brought to the major cities in Canada, they created their own infrastructure. They trained quality people and brought them up. So by the 3rd year of The X-Files,
They fixed the problem.
it looked great. Everything looked great. And now instead of one crew that was sort of okay, now they had crew depth of 7 or 8 crews. And they would have 3 or 4 TV series in Toronto, all filming at the same time, while somebody else was doing a feature film, and to a lesser extent in Vancouver. Now, if I can just go one step further.
Sure.
Now, Californians look at this, go, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So,
Because they're losing at this point.
because they're
correct?
losing, and at the same time, other states in the United States are looking at Canada and saying, well, if Canada can do that, we can do that. So in the mid 2000s, and I want to try and track this back, during Arnold Schwarzenegger's gubernatorial years, and I think he was there for about 5 or 6 years, but a film incentive bill came up 3 times during his term and a half as governor. And you would think that Arnold had the gravitas from Hollywood as well as Sacramento that he would have passed that. Well, all 3 of those died in committee. And it just became a political football because the Democrats said, yes, this is our Los Angeles key industry and we need to do this. We're losing X million dollars and X thousand jobs a year. The Republicans said, well, you know what, it's not a bad idea, but if we can do it for film, we can do it for the aerospace industry. And then the Democrats said, you know what, if we can do it for the aerospace industry, we can do it for agriculture. And there it went. And there it went. And it died in committee 3 times. And that, I'm sorry, died in committee twice. So let me take that back. The 3rd time, if you'll remember, late in his, I think it was next to the last year in his term, the budget collapsed. And he had to completely redo the budget mid-term. So they completely redid the budget, and he took that film incentive bill and put it in as a line item. Nobody even saw it, and it passed. And that was the bill we've had for the last few years, which is $100 million a year in tax incentives for a certain cost feature film or TV. So it's like, it's got to be more than 5, but it can't be it can't be more than 50. I don't remember the exact numbers. Well, and it's tremendously successful. They are the applications are put in a lottery system, and there are more applications on July 1st submitted than there are dollars. So
Wow.
it's immediately utilized. It takes a while to sort out the applications, but you know, a couple of weeks later, here it is. We've got $100 million, and it's going to go to these 17 productions until the next year. So the bill that's now working its way through the Assembly and the State Senate is the promoters are saying, look how effective this has been for the last few years, but we're still losing more and more every year, because now there are 43 states that have incentive packages and over a dozen countries.
Wow.
So we need to increase this. We need to double it. We need to triple it. They have a dollar figure on it. Well, the other side is saying, no, we've got some figures that are showing that even though it is getting some of the jobs back, and it does create revenue into the cities and counties, primarily Southern California, what we're seeing is not that it's paying for itself in the Treasury, it's actually losing 35 cents on a dollar. So for every dollar that's spent, we lose 35 cents. So for every $100 million that's spent, we lose $35 million. So you now have two conflicting financial reports. You have the pro increase the bill that says for every dollar we spend, we create $1.11 into the Treasury, and that's all you need. It just needs to pay for itself, because all of the rest of the millions and millions of dollars go to the workers and the rollover industries. And the other side is saying, yeah, if that were true, but it's not. Here's our figures that say it's 65 cents on the dollar, and that's not enough.
Do you think that we'll ever be in a situation where California or Hollywood will no longer be that place where movie stars are, the place where there's always something being videoed and some movie being shot? Do you think that that can change if we're not proactive?
That's almost a trick question. I don't think, based on our conversation, that California will ever lose so much production that the Hollywood studios, all of them, close down and they become furniture stores. No, I don't think that. However, and being a film commissioner who works with locations, I'm biting my tongue mentally as I say this. Technology is advancing so quickly that you have people that work here that on their off hours are making, from a viewing standpoint, are making quality short feature films with cameras with names like Red and Red 2 that costs a couple $1,000s, a few $1,000s. That you know, the script may not be as good, the actors may not be as good, but when you look at it, if you turn the sound down and look at it, it looks every bit as good as feature films that you see on location, because the quality of the cameras and the technology is so good. Well, that technology is going to continue to increase and progress in all fields. We've already seen several feature films that have been shot entirely in a studio with green screens. If your camera people turn the camera around, they would see in your studio you have a green screen which allows you to project other backgrounds that look very realistic. And we've already seen several major feature films that have green screened all of their locations. How long will it take until somebody can stand at every major intersection in Fresno and do several 360-degree filming videos, high definition computer filming, and just commit it to a thumb drive. And they have every location they need.
That's incredible. So the industry is going to change in the next 10, 20, 30 years.
I would say 20.
In the next 20 years. Are we still going to see, though, the multi-million-dollar movies, in your opinion? I mean, are we still going to see the $300 million movie and the $200 million movie? I mean, it sounds like as technology develops, it might be more cheaper to produce.
It might be more cheaper to produce, and you might see the cost of the major feature films go down. You're starting to see less of them being made, and those that are made, you'll notice you don't see a $300 million Warner Brothers movie or a $300 million Paramount movie. You see a $300 Sony MGM Interscope movie, because now it takes 3 companies to come up with enough money to make that. And if that movie bombs,
they all lose.
That's the last $300 million movie they make for a long time, because they have to make a bunch of $50 million movies that are profitable before they take a chance on another $200, $250, $300 million movie.
And are there times where these studios and these production companies will make something and not release it? And the reason I asked the question is, you know, we heard that there was a Tom Cruise movie years back that was finished, but it was waiting to get released. I mean, do they play those type of, I don't want to say games, but those kind of things?
Well, there are always movies held, but not primarily for budgetary reasons. It's primarily for scheduling reasons, either relating to what the studio is releasing or relating to what the star is releasing and when. So if Tom Cruise is making Mission Impossible 5 for whoever he makes it for, and he already has 3 films in the can and they're scheduled, Mission Impossible 5 has got a schedule through that. They just can't step on something else. And occasionally that happens where you'll see 2 different companies really, and with smaller films, you'll see 2 different companies release films within a month from the same star. And usually one of them wins and one of them loses. But the loser is trying to, you know, ride on the coattails of the other film, which is probably the better of the 2 features.
After something gets filmed, how long till it gets released? Because, you know, there are times where we see or read that so-and-so is making, for example, James Bond is making another movie and they're actually doing the shooting, but it takes them years later to release it. Is that common?
It's not common. There's usually, depending on the size of the film and the amount of time it takes to do the primary photography, that determines how much time for post-production. And then you have the distribution concerns that we just talked about. So there are great films that have been filmed very quickly that take very little post-production and can be released you know, pretty fast. The film with, speaking of Tom Cruise, the film with Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson, Demi Moore, You Can't Handle the Truth.
Yeah, Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men. You had 5 days, maybe 2 weeks in an area that doubled for Guantanamo, and the rest of it was in a courtroom. That's a pretty inexpensive
And they made
film.
a lot of money off that movie.
Yeah. So you have that, but the more expansive the movie, then the longer it takes to edit it. You have to come back if it's on location. You have to bring the people back for voice dubbing. If you're on location, the wind blows, or you think you're in the middle of nowhere and you get a car horn. So now you have to come back and do voice dubbing. Well, you either have to bring Tom Cruise back to do voice dubbing, or you have to bring in somebody who can do Tom Cruise's voice to do voice dubbing to fit into your calendar if you can't get Cruise. Also, speaking of voice dubbing, many of the movies have to do voice dubbing just simply to get it on TV for the profanity factor. I mean, I've been watching, I never had Showtime. I was at HBO. But occasionally I would see Dexter on Showtime. Really cool, very creepy, squishy, crazy show, but huge profanity. Well, it's now on a couple different cable TV stations, and so I watch a couple episodes on the weekends, and you hear things like, forget that, you know, and they have to go back. They either have to do it at the time or go back and take out all the profanity so they can get it on basic cable TV.
Ray, believe it or not, we are out of time again this week on the program. We have to get you back because we can do a whole nother show on voice dubbing.
You need to do this show twice a week, and I'll just come in once a week until we run out of stuff.
That's all for this edition of San Joaquin Spotlight. Our guest has been the one and only Ray Arthur, Film Commissioner for Fresno Film Commissioner, actually. And every time he's on, he tells us another incredible story about films. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you also to the volunteer crew that made this and every production possible. For you studios out there that need good workers, our crew is excellent. Their names are going to appear in the credits after this show. Thank you to our audience members listening to us on 90.7 FM, KFSR Fresno, or watching us on Comcast 93 or AT&T 99, the CMAC channel. I'm your host, Sevag Tatiosian. Tune in next week for a new edition.